This is the Erasing Shame podcast, Season 3. Honest talk for healthy living, growing, and thriving.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of Erasing Shame. Today I am here with my friend BJ Kang, who I had met through the community of podcasting, and I'm really excited to be able to bring him on today. Let me read a little bit about BJ. BJ, actually his full name is Brian Kang, is a podcaster for the Asian American Voice and a business owner that helps therapists in private practice save time by completing their admin tasks. And he has been intrigued by the topic of shame in the past 10 years when he started his own path of self-discovery, self-exploration, and started kind of doing what I'm doing, basically, really delving into the topic more. And since then, he has been able to launch his own business called therapisadmin.com. We connected actually, maybe 6 months ago, BJ, because you are running the podcast for the Asian American Voice, which basically gets to share and highlight a lot of stories about entrepreneurs and different maybe ceilings or struggles that people would experience within that field, especially from the Asian American experience. And so I'm happy to be able to bring you on today so we can delve into that a little further and really address the topic of leadership and entrepreneurship around shame. So welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nancy. I love the work that you and DJ are doing. And the whole journey with podcasting and interviewing entrepreneurs was Asian American entrepreneurs and just people not going the straight and narrow path, but really carving a path out for them that was different than what society's expectations were. That was a really intriguing topic for me. And then also wanted to wrap in some of the struggles with mental health awareness that many people and also Asian Americans feel. So yeah, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing and that you're doing, Nancy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know, because when we connected, there was a little bit of a aha epiphany moment that you said that you had too, and then you were able to bring DJ onto your podcast, and he filmed an episode maybe 3 months ago or 6 months ago. To really bring awareness, because it is something that goes hand in hand when we're really pushing forward with personal development, leadership development, and pursuing big goals and dreams. And if we don't really talk about the mental health aspect or just healing or therapy, things that have been weighing us down and releasing those things, then it's really hard to grow and move forward from that. So it looks though like you have built a whole business around that aspect now. So maybe just share a little bit of your journey and your story of how that's progressed for the past few months. Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, I really started the Asian American Voice podcast a few years ago now when I left my 9 to 5. I really wanted to interview those entrepreneurs and people following their dreams. And it's evolved since then. I mean, since then I've been doing some personal development coaching, some business coaching, some sales coaching. And I really wanted to pivot the podcast into a little bit more about mental health awareness for Asian Americans, just to really focus on that as a topic more than the entrepreneurship side, because it's such an intriguing topic for me. And then since then, I haven't been too active with the podcast. It's been just busy with other things, but I launched a Therapist Admin because I felt like for me, it was a way for me to support therapists in their work, but not actually have to go through school and get all those 3,000 hours of licensing. And I didn't really feel like that was my path as of right now. I mean, I felt that in the past, the calling to do that. So I figured that if I can take off stuff off of their plate, like the admin tasks, the phone, the scheduling, so they can focus on their client work. It's almost like a bigger mission for me for them to be able to see more clients, heal clients in a more effective way. So hopefully there's a ripple effect there. At the same time, building a business that's sustainable for myself as well. But entrepreneurship is very isolating at times, and there is a lot of shame that comes up in my own mind. I know I'm not the only one, but for me personally, a lot of, and we talked about this before we started recording, perfectionism, a lot of failures, a lot of I'm not far enough along, a lot of comparison. And when I don't have an outlet to talk about those things, which a lot of solo entrepreneurs as myself don't have that outlet, it could start to fester, and you start to bog you down, and you start to get sad, and then you can't really work. And so I've been through all of those emotions these past, of course, past 10 years of self-discovery. And since I've started my business past, I'd say 3.5 years.
Yeah, I know it's definitely something that doesn't get talked about much. And like you said, everyone has this journey of being able to build their business, and it's a lonely journey, and we're all experiencing. So why aren't we talking about it, right? Because it's like, I don't know if you've seen that meme where they have like a EKG, like it's an up and down roller coaster of the life of an entrepreneur. And when there is shame that's attached to that as well, then you feel like you're going through it all alone. But really, the power is in being able to talk about it and connect to other people, have masterminds and have community to motivate and energize you, and to be able to do bigger things than yourself, and have blind spots, right? That have other people catch your blind spots to be able to really bring a greater level of work and a greater level of yourself to the drawing board. So yeah, it's so crazy that we feel that, but I hope that this will be able to give courage for other people to really talk about it, because people kind of just see the end result and they don't really understand the process. But without perfection and without failing forward, right, then there can't be success, and it's not always going to look like perfection when we're always striving for excellence right from the beginning. So
Yeah, absolutely. It could be really hard to ask for help. I don't know if it's just me personally. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I think me personally, there was a lot of ego and pride wrapped into it as well. Like I wanted to always not share my struggles because I felt like I didn't want to either burden people or I didn't want to look like I was weak. And that's something that I really need to have been working on a lot. And that definition of not just entrepreneurship, but masculinity as well, and Asian masculinity. And community is huge, just like you said, masterminds, being able to have groups of people that are on the same journey of entrepreneurship is absolutely huge, because you can share your struggles, you can hear feedback from others and know that you're not alone. And it's not just entrepreneurship either, right? Just in every aspect of our life, whether we're struggling with some sort of addiction or some sort of depression or mental health issue, to have other people that are also struggling within that same vein is huge, to be able to have an outlet of people that understand exactly what's going on. So I'm a big proponent of community. I'm starting to learn that. I mean, I think it's been a journey for me as well to be able to start to reach my hand out for help, and then also at the same time help others, because that can be so healing as well.
yeah. Did you find that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that were able to succeed in businesses that were a lot more isolating, kind of like me, myself, and I, or they were very team driven and they were able to be successful in running large organizations and managing teams in your experience?
I say both. They always say the power of other people to be like power of partnership, and me myself, I went through both. Having being a solo entrepreneur, and then also going through some partnerships, and both have their pluses and minuses. Because in solo entrepreneurship, you make whatever decision you want. You can be as agile as you want. You don't have to answer to anybody but yourself. And at the same time, it could be very isolating. Partnership, you have someone to bounce ideas off of. Hopefully, it's someone that has complementary strengths to balance out your lack of skill or your desire for that skill. But at the same time, partnerships can be complicated, right? There's a lot of people bring in their own baggage. I bring in my own baggage, and there's interpersonal conflict that happens. So I've been through both in the past few years. I wouldn't want to say one is better or than the other. They just both have their pluses and minuses. But you see stories, and most of the time, people that have more growth, I would say that they usually have a team of people, because there's no way you can handle everything, especially as you scale and grow. It's not sustainable. You're going to burn out, and you can hire people, like you can outsource people, but that can also be a struggle as well. There's no trust or buy-in from these outsourced companies. So it can go many different directions. And as of right now, I'm back to being a solo entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and which is, again, has its pluses and minuses. But I mean, I don't know where I'll be in a year or two, but hopefully I won't be. I don't plan on being a solo entrepreneur for the rest of my life. I don't want that.
Yeah, and I was asking because I've been learning a lot about shame since we last connected a year back or whatnot. And one of the things that shame causes is rigidity, right? As well as inflexibility because of our arrested development in our brain. So sometimes I just wonder about, when people are working in very communal groups, trying to do big things and make a lot of big decisions, how that looks like if they're able to really be able to find success in a lot of organizations that can have more group focus. Because what I see is a lot of times, especially in the Vietnamese community, it's kind of like their own business and they maybe run a team and they hire people. But it's usually just like one or two people that's running the business and it's their own personal business, like a mom and pop shop or something. Versus, because I'm in the leadership development space, let's say Filipino people, they are a lot more equipped with working together in collaboration. So there's less conflict. But I was just curious in terms of like the people that you've interviewed, how that looks like. And the other thing too is, when we have Arrested Development, and everybody probably has this to some degree, right? But especially being in a shame culture, we basically lack an ability to create our own stance, like have a strong stance or opinion or identity around something. And when we can't necessarily bring that clearly in the business world, then consumers have a confusing message, right? So yeah, I was wondering about the successes that you have found from other Asian entrepreneurs, if any of that kind of registered, if any of that resonates with you.
I think the thing that resonated with me is there's a lot of what I gather from that is that there's a lot of shame-based companies and corporations. Like in my past working for other people, I would see a lot of, because I worked for a predominantly Asian team before, and there was actually a lot of shame within that team, within that corporation. And I'm not going to name it, of course, but and then people didn't even know they were doing it, right? Because a lot of times shame gets passed on unconsciously. The person that's passing on the shame does so unconsciously, doesn't even realize that perhaps they were raised with shame and just in the language. And that's very true in many sales organizations. I've been in sales for 13 plus years. So every single organization I was in, for the most part, there was just so much shame within that company that got passed on. In terms of, so that's one thing that came to mind. In terms of rigidity, I could see that happening with shame as well. In terms of if you want to be a real influential leader, like there's really no, when you're feeling shame, you're so like tight and like you're not loose and like open, you're not authentic. Everything is either perfection or you're afraid, you're driven by fear. So I can see that happening too for myself and other people I've observed along the way. But that's an interesting thing that you mentioned, though, different types of Asian cultures, where the Filipino culture might be a little bit more community-based, whereas perhaps Chinese or even Korean, because my parents were entrepreneurs and small business owners, and they were always a mom and pop shop. They had employees, but for the most part, they were always there 12, 16 hours, whether it was a control issue, whether it was shame, whether it was a combination of both, perfectionism, everything together. I'm not sure, but I definitely saw that growing up as well.
Yeah, because we'll also see like a lot of Korean people only do business within the Korean community. So like there's also within each group, right, there are nuances of how trust is built and relationships. So it was just a thought because I know you've talked to a lot of different people now. I'd say one thing I always think about, which is kind of a funny thought, is because, we have the bad rap of Asians are bad drivers. And I'm like, yeah, because that's an example of how we're rigid and we're like science and math people, A plus B equals C, and it's like all the soft skills. It just wasn't valued. So here in America, for us to be able to learn more about how to be seen, how to be different, how to be our authentic selves, it's kind of like this weird thought. And like for us being in leadership development, we get to learn about this. We get to really press into this, but it's still like, a learning experience, I think, for me, delving into the world of leadership development. And now, 10 years later, I've grown so much. But for those who, let's just say, never choose to enter into that field, into that space, it's like, I wonder, the experience or how it feels, to continue to kind of just feel if any of those things are limiting the things that they really want to pursue.
I would say so, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's to be able to, I think it's just so important as a leader to actually put the mirror in front of yourself and have, I think the number one quality for a leader is actually self-awareness and
Yep.
starting to peel the onion away, because without self-awareness, whether it's parenting or leadership in the workplace or just in life at church, I feel like when people are not self-aware and they don't realize that they're feeling shame towards themselves, that gets unconsciously passed on to whoever they're leading as well. And on another
Mhm.
note, I'm a pretty, not to brag, but I'm a pretty dang good driver as an Asian. And I hate that stereotype, because then like I always feel like with something, because I'm not a perfect driver, so sometimes I make mistakes and I cut people off. I don't mean to. And then I just have this thought, like when I do that, that they're probably thinking like, oh man, that's just like another notch or another point saying that Asian drivers suck. So I'm
I remember,
perpetuating the stereotype.
I remember you had a story posted just about that.
Oh yeah, that story. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't remind the audience about it, but it's all about cutting someone off and the whole Asian
Yeah.
driver thing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd say, when there is shame, there is a lack of authenticity. And when you really think about it, authenticity is pretty much what's needed for success to be an influencer, to be successful in business here in
Mhm.
America, especially where it's individualistic in culture. But the opposite of that is conformity. So it's like the enemy of our greatness is, our values that we grew up in here in the American culture. There's a conflict. Um,
Mhm.
how did you really start breaking out of that for yourself?
I mean, combination of therapy. I'm a big proponent of therapy, and I think that not enough people, let alone Asian Americans, let alone Asian American males, don't talk about what's going on, and they don't want to seek professional counseling. So therapy has always been a huge. I'm not currently actually that's not true. I go to couples therapy once a month with my wife as a kind of like a tune up. Just making sure we have someone else in the room, but therapy was really big for me, and then just personal development and just reading books and listen to podcasts as well, and just really diving into self-discovery and finding myself, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I was feeling a lot of conformity. Like my whole life I feel like I've been conforming, going through the Asian progression, get good grades in high school, middle school, get good grades in high school so you can get a good college, so you can get a good job. And then that's pretty much, you're like a cattle, right? In the herd. And I really disliked that. And I didn't even realize I disliked it that much. Actually, that's not true. In high school, I definitely felt like a caged bird. I felt like there was something off about the school structure that I really disliked for myself. I was always more of a kind of rebellious against authority as well. And I own that now. In the past, I would get kind of like ridiculed, and it wasn't right for me to do that. I wasn't allowed to do that. And so that I kind of just shrink into the conformity of society or teachers or even my parents. They tried their best. I love them, but they wanted me to be safe and secure because that was their main desire for me, which I totally get. But at the same time, I realized that I had to go to therapy, talk about these things, and take risks, like take a bunch of risks, whether it's going to improv class or just taking up a hobby that I feel uncomfortable with, and then going to therapy, talking about these things, whether it's support group therapy or individual therapy, and then just taking action. Like I know that that's a lot of times that's a little bit cliche in the entrepreneur world, like take action, hustle, go. But there's a truth to that too. Sometimes we get frozen in our fear, and sometimes the way to break out of that is you actually have to move and do something towards it. It might not be the final product, but at least just taking some action towards that. So conformity has been big for me. I would say that sometimes I get angry around that topic because I think that I had a lot of lost years around conformity, but now I'm more apt to speaking my mind and going the route that's authentic to me rather than what's expected of me.
Yeah, because conformity has always been something that was a safety net, right? Like we didn't
Mhm.
have to have an opinion, we didn't have to have a stance, we didn't have to be anything other than to blend in or follow the rules of our parents. And as it comes to arrested development and shame, I interviewed the director of my program last week, but we even talked about how we basically, if we have shame, there's a dual identity. So you have a chameleon like approach to all of the surroundings and environments that you go into, and you don't even really know who you are. So the fun thing is that, we get to now define who we are. And it's like when we've done the work and really start asking ourselves those questions and looking in the mirror, like you said, um, yeah, you get to start filling that space and understanding your uniqueness and all the great gifts that you have. And I'm so excited that you were able to find a business that was really able to tailor to your strengths and also your passions and the needs that you really felt passionate about since we've connected because things have changed and shifted in your world as well. You were kind of trying to figure that out, and it looks like it's been progressing nicely since.
Yeah, it's been exciting. It feels like it's greater than just about the money or getting more clients. It's really a greater mission behind it. So that feels really good,
Hmm.
and it's been great. And yeah, I think it's just been a really great journey, and it's exciting for sure.
Yeah. I think for me, I was starting to realize I was hitting walls because I knew I was like the top person, the top agent in my office. When anybody had technical questions, I was like the go-to person because I was just technical and I obviously did my work and I was passionate about helping my clients as best as I can. And I'm in the world of finance. But one thing that scared me was the idea of being seen, like the idea
Mhm.
of being exposed. And that's when it really uncovered something deeper for me of like, wow, when you start putting yourself out there and there's that opportunity for criticism,
Mhm.
for being judged, for
Mhm.
being unaccepted. And I knew I was good at what I did, but there was a limit behind this feeling of being exposure. And that's when I started delving into shame. And you understand like how in collectivist cultures is like the tallest blade in the grass gets cut first
Mhm.
because there's no room for having your unique identity or um, being put out there like that. So did you ever experience that for yourself or the people that you talked to? Was there a lot of stories around that?
Oh yeah, when I first started podcasting, I mean, I had no idea how to do it at all. I learned it from scratch, and to have to expose myself and put myself out there, to interview people and to have a voice where anybody can listen to it anytime, anywhere in the world on iTunes or whatever the podcast is at. That was a really scary thought, and that's usually the reason why I think most people don't go after their dreams or actually show up or want to be seen. It's that fear of criticism and ridicule,
Mhm.
a fear of not being accepted. That's why public speaking is such a huge, it's like the number two fear all
Yeah.
the time, right? Because it's really a fear of being ostracized or a fear of people talking behind your back. But that's such a, I've been just so sick and tired of caring what other people think.
Mhm.
Almost to the point where it's actually swung too much to the other side, where I catch myself kind of being a sort of like a, maybe it's just because I feel uncomfortable doing it now. That when I do it now, I feel almost rude, or I feel, uh, yeah, I feel rude, or I feel like I'm not a good member of society because I'm being too outspoken. And I think for women, also it's even bigger because with the gender roles and all that. But even for me, I felt really, when I felt a lot of anger around how much I have not shown up in my life. So it was like a grieving process, and
Mm.
then it came out like it swung too far on the other end, where I was just kind of becoming, at times, maybe I'm being hard on myself, but kind of a jerk at times. But maybe that's just my own perception. I don't know. So, but I'm trying to swing back to that middle ground where I'm not like shrinking and not being seen, and also where I'm not being just like brash and too like rude or whatever that may be. So I'm trying to find that. I know it's a balance. People talk about that a lot, but it's kind of somewhere in the middle instead.
Yeah, that's usually what happens when there's growth. You kind of go fully to one
Hmm.
side, and then it finally goes back to a nice medium of something beautiful. And I know that's been the year that I've been on this journey too. And it's just a part of the process, but having an awareness of it, it's a healthy awareness. So, yeah, because even with feeling seen and all that stuff, like we talk about leadership, and it's always like John Maxwell leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right? And that's hard for cultures that are collective because having influence means being authoritative, I feel. So it's
Hmm.
looked at as a bad thing because there's a lot of power, fear, control behind shame based communities. Um, and there's also this feeling of I don't want to play that role because then I will be disconnected from my community. I will be looked at in a different way versus I just want to belong. um, and I think what I recognized is when you're in environments where there's high honor, there also is high shame. And therefore, what works for the Asian community is having very clear hierarchy and roles, structure, so that you know exactly where you fit in or what your role is. And even in the family system, I think the part about that is something that we need to be careful is the expectations that's placed on that, right? So it's like with our families, like there's so much expectation. For me, I was like the oldest of all my cousins, and I just lived in that identity for so long because I was the first to go to college and the first of everything, So I was like, look up to your older sister. And then finally I just realized I'm like, I was burnt out. Like I'm not even living for myself anymore. Yeah. Did you kind of experience that, or did you notice that in your surroundings in terms of like high honor, high shame cultures? Because it's kind of like two sides of the coin, right? If there is high honor, then there's also high shame, and we can easily honor others that are around us that maybe are in higher positions of leadership, or maybe that are idolized in society, whether it's media, social media, or majority culture, stuff like that. But the downside is that we take on that shame, and like it's our shame. So the world may not always experience it because it's not their experience of it. But what I find that is because we have shame, we are shame based and shame adverse within the Asian community as a collective. It's something that there's a trap behind it. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the high honor, high shame thing is definitely because it could be isolating at the top, and you see it in a lot of family systems. I saw it in my immediate family, where depending on where you rank in siblings, that's where you feel like, just like your story was, Nancy, you felt a lot of pressure, or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're there and you feel the burden of taking on that hierarchical role in the family, or even just in business or whatever that may be. And absolutely, I mean, I think honor, especially in the Korean community, it's all about honor and pride and all that. And when there's a leadership, or when there's high honor, there's absolutely a lot of shame as well, because it's just the expectation, I think, from learning from our parents, our relatives, and that being passed on to us again, and having to navigate that. So
Yeah. Did you feel it as you were delving into entrepreneurship for yourself?
yeah, I think I felt it a little bit, because when you're podcasting, right, you automatically take a role of almost authority, right? Because you are the host, you are the leader, and you don't really know who's listening, but people are listening because you see people downloading it on your stats and stuff like that. I think I felt it a little bit. There was a little bit of pressure, but it wasn't too bad in the sense. I
Yeah.
think by then I had healed a lot of that, so it wasn't too much. I didn't want to be some sort of like authoritarian, right? That's never really my leadership style, and whether it's in business or life and family, because a lot of times you see it in families too, where if a lot of the older generation, they actually look down on the youth, and then the youth is basically becomes like they got to do what you say, or if they pour you a drink, you gotta drink it, or else it's disrespectful. Like that stuff's, man. I'm not all about that anymore. Like, um, there was a time, but I think I felt it a little bit on my journey, but I just see it all the time, that whole honor and hierarchy, and how that plays into shame as well, for the person that's leading and for the person that is following, so to speak.
Yeah, because it can be both. Because I think here, as an individualistic culture, when we talk about influence, right, and being able to bring a message to the world and change the world and stuff like that, but the reverse side of the Asian culture, where it's like that's a bad thing. So for the Asian community, what I've been able to translate leadership is loyalty, and that's really what works within the collective spaces, because it doesn't require having a big voice or standing at the top of the podium or being front and center in front of like a commercial or whatever, but it's the relationships that you build behind the scene, and the commitments that you have to one another, the loyalty that you build to one another.
Yeah, I think that also for leadership, the leaders that I really am attracted to and I really look up to and want to pull from are the ones that have like servant leadership. And
Mhm.
maybe that's a little bit about loyalty as well, but the ones that really care about their people before themselves, not to the point where they're giving away themselves and it becomes codependent and unhealthy, but in a sense that, hey, like I'm not going to be, I don't know if you've seen that image of the leader where they are basically being carried by their employees. Um, like that's not that, like they say no, that's not a leader, and they say a
Yeah.
leader is the one in the front that's pulling with, they're not the one being carried, they're pulling together. So I always was attracted to that type of leader. Like I worked in a lot of restaurants, and I always like the leaders that were in there like bussing the tables when I was a busser or serving and helping run food, rather than the ones that just like pointing like we had this regional manager back in the day, and he would just come in once a month or something, and he would just basically criticize us that we're not doing the right job. And man, that guy,
Yeah,
forget
nobody
that
wants a
guy.
manager. Everyone wants to be empowered, right? And to be led and have someone jump in there with them. And I think it's especially important within collectivist cultures because there's a lot of shame that's modeled and that we feel like we're doing it together and there's a loyalty and a relationship in that. So yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know there's so much around the topic of leadership development and entrepreneurship. I mean, have you had other thoughts about, since we decided to have this conversation of what that really looks like for you or your experiences with that?
With shame and entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
I would say just the comparison is killer, and then too much social media is just pervasive for an entrepreneur. It can be a great tool to get motivated, to see what other people are doing, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and it could also get into a lot of comparison and thinking that you're not further along than you need to be, and that you need to follow exactly to the T what that person is doing. So a lot of like you got to like do what they no, that's everyone has different values, has different systems for themselves that work for them. Some people can work 18-hour, 19-hour days, and that's what drives them. But a lot of times that's not healthy for most people. And so you don't have to be hustling all the time. And my wife always tells me like, because I can get into workaholic mode where I just want to achieve and achieve success, and I want to just crush all my goals and all that. But that sometimes it's like the never ending carrot, the dangling carrot where I'm just constantly chasing. So I've been shifting a lot towards just being more accepting of where I'm at, taking it, being in the present moment has helped me a lot with my shame around that. And then just not comparing. I think that helps. And just having other tools like meditation, prayer, and just reading books, things like that have been really helpful for me to be able to, and talking about these things out loud is helpful. Talking about feelings around entrepreneurship is also really important. That's more than half the game. That's a huge percentage of just the mentality of where I'm at so that I can be productive. Because when I'm in a place of comparison and shame, then I just freeze. I don't want to do anything. I just want to be on
Yeah,
my phone scrolling through social media, or just want
exactly.
to veg out. So
Yeah, because actually, when we're doing things like social media or we're in our addictions, it's like we're running away from ourselves and we're not dealing with what's inside. We're escaping the pain. And it's like, man, when you face it head on, that's when you actually can overcome it. And so I'm so grateful for all the work that I've been able to be exposed to in the leadership development world. And I know you've done a lot of that work for yourself, but yeah, definitely putting in the work, and so that you can actually break the cycles of whatever that's looked like for you in terms of the limitations, the ceilings that you've had, the bad habits, the bad relationships, right? There's so many things because it affects our whole being, not just in terms of business, but everything about us. So I know you've been stepping into more of the therapy and mental health space and stuff like that. So it's exciting to really be able to see that added to the conversation more. But I'm learning so much more about, trauma and rewiring the brain through neurolinguistic programming and how to be able to do that in a way that can really help us press into bigger dreams and goals and stuff like that. So it's exciting because there is light at the end of the tunnel. Like there are ways to be able to overcome shame if you really choose to press into it. So
yeah, there's a lot of different resources out there. It could be therapy, it could be NLP. That's really cool, Nancy. The training that you're going through and the work that you're doing yourself to be able to help others. I do some coaching as well, and just to be able to talk. It doesn't have to necessarily be therapy, but even talking with someone that you trust and that's going to accept you and not shame you back or shame you is
mhm.
so important. And I've had a lot of business coaches as well through this entrepreneurial journey. It's been really helpful just to be able to talk about what's going on and not just strategize, but see how I'm doing as a human being, first and foremost, and then talking about strategies of how to build a business effectively. And I'm definitely attracted to the leaders, like I said earlier, that are more about they don't use fear-based tactics or shame-based tactics, because there's a lot of coaches and probably even therapists out there that use that, and a lot of leaders out there. And I just think that if for people listening out there, just to be just to be careful a little bit and just do your research on how you're getting help, and is that person, do you get like an intuitive feeling that that person is shame based, or just not, doesn't jive with your style. Is just to, there's a lot of other resources out there.
Yeah, but you know what? I've been thinking about that too, because it's like we talk about shame in the US and it's considered more or less a bad thing, right? There is a purpose behind shame. Um, but more or less it's bad because it just debilitates you. But when you go
Mhm.
to Asia and it's the norm and people do live in that place, like they kind of do need that authoritative figure, or they actually need someone telling them what to do. So I guess it's really like, where are you at? What serves you? And what's the environment that you're in? And if the environment's not working for you, then you've got to change on the inside, or vice versa. It's one or the other. It's either you change the environment and the container that it's sitting in, right? Or basically you change yourself. So
Mhm.
I think here in the US we talk about like we've got to do the work because it's individualistic and stuff like that. But I don't really know how much a problem it is for people who are in a shame-based environment like in Asia. Have you been to Asia?
Yeah, I went to Vietnam back in 2013. I went to Korea back in 2014, I think. I've
Hmm.
been to Korea a few times. So that's it. That's where I've been. Yeah. And I don't know. I wasn't there long enough to really pick up on too much of the culture. I think
Yeah.
I'm such an American. I mean, I was born here, and yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point though, about different cultures and how they experience leadership and
Mhm.
shame and authoritative figures, and what they would be more receptive to. I didn't think about that. So that's
Yeah, because if I'm going to try to lead someone like the way that I'm wanting to be led, but they're not yet ready, right? Then we got to kind of meet them where they're at, and that's leadership 101, right? Being able to serve our clients in what they need. Yeah, but I've been thinking about that too because I really think more so the conflict that we have as more or less, first and second generation Asian Americans here is because we grew up in that Asian American Asian set of values, but we're breaking through and wanting to be more of our individualistic selves. And so there's just a lot of that inner conflict, inner turmoil. But people who came here from another country and they just came here for college or whatnot after their adult years, like I don't think they experience it in the same way.
it's definitely a different experience to have. For me, my parents immigrated here, and you have the American culture where you're trying to assimilate, trying to pick up on American culture, and then at home you have the Asian culture, honor. They want to preserve some of the culture, but not all of it. It's a very confusing generation for the one to be born through immigrant parents here. There's a lot of expectation as well,
Yeah.
because like I feel guilty sometimes, right? My parents immigrated here. You get that story, like they did it for a better life for me and my sister, and so therefore, like I always felt this intense pressure, and I saw a lot of shame and a lot of mental health issues amongst my peers when I was growing up in high school. There's a lot of lost, especially Asian American men around me that were super angry, confused. They would drink a lot. Shoot, I would drink a lot. Just go party, because it's a very confusing generation to have to be. You're almost pulled in two different directions, and you're confused, and you're trying to make your own identity, trying to honor your parents and all that stuff. And then you also have teenage angst and hormones and all that as well at the same time. So
Yeah. Yeah, because I even hear like you'll find, there's a whole spectrum of like they're super Asian or like they're more Americanized. Like there's a whole range of people, but let's just say between you and me, like we have chosen to do more of like breaking out of the box. But there's a lot of people even here, I feel like, that's their safe spot. They're comfortable there. And maybe they do need a little bit more of that like direct authoritative leadership. But in terms of what is valued on a larger scale, um, to be successful and have influence America, at some point that's got to shift, right? And that's if that's a value for that person. If that's something that they actually care to be able to do something with. But if they don't, then it works for them, I guess.
no, you're right though, because yeah, you're right. Me and you have been on a different path where we're trying to carve our own path. But they're like the Asian American voice. I was getting emails and calls from people because there were a lot of people in their 30s and 40s that were felt like they were stuck in their careers, and I would coach some of them through their career changes. And there was so much resistance to breaking out of it. Like they were completely miserable, like 35-year-old engineers or 40-year-old lawyers that were making, multiple, making a couple $100,000 a year, but they felt the golden handcuffs and they didn't want to change. They didn't want to break free from that. And I understand it's scary. They had family to support, but I would see that a lot as they had been working their whole life up to that point, whether it was for them or for their parents. I'm not sure, but they would get to a point and they'd be depressed and they wouldn't want to make a shift because it's really scary. And I totally understood that, I just totally understand it. But I saw it a lot, talking to people that would reach out to me by listening to the podcast, people that would listen to the podcast.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of leadership development work too. And, I've had conversations with the trainers and they say, usually the Asian American and Middle Eastern communities have the most challenges to do the leadership development work because it's hard work, and I think about it and I'm like, yeah, well, there's a way to bridge that gap, I believe, and that's really the mission that I'm on. And sometimes we do have to like meet people where they're at in terms of what they need, and if they respond to that better, then at least for a season, then that's where they're at. But hopefully they don't stay there, right? But yeah, it's interesting to really start putting words into all of this, and for us being able to be more flexible because we've kind of been on both sides of the spectrum now. Hopefully we can bring a voice and be able to bring more solutions to that as well to affect the next generation behind us. So yeah, I think that's pretty much wrapping up our time right now though. Did you have any other final thoughts, VJ, to add to
No.
the topic?
No, I just appreciate this topic, and that really flew by. That time just flew by, so that's a good sign. Again, anyone out there, I mean, just if you're feeling shame, if you're beating yourself up, just be a little easy on yourself. Life is too short, and just be your own advocate, your best advocate. I know it sounds a little bit, it doesn't sound corny at all. It's just, you gotta just. We spend the most time with ourselves, and shame usually starts for me in my mind and my thoughts. And just be easy on yourself out there. I mean, it's life is hard enough to be able to have the shame voice and the shame cycle in your mind. Just lighten up, and I hope you get the help you need if you're feeling shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, because we've kind of explored two ends of the spectrum of leadership development within an individualistic and more of a collective culture, it's what are your needs and where are you at, and yourself best, but I would say always have something that's always going to pull you forward, because there's always going to be another level for us, and we've been doing this for, you said 10 13 years for yourself. There's always going to be someone above that we are going to want to challenge us to grow and to be able to do bigger things. But there's also kind of understanding, like, if that's where you're at, or maybe you just need that one step above you, and if that could be, like we talked about, something that will be more direct or authoritative in leadership. And not to say that that's a bad thing when it comes to shame community, but just giving clear direction, accountability, roles, and expectations within that relationship versus just like, no, yeah, you figure it out, and be empowered, right? Because sometimes, like, it doesn't happen overnight. So
Sure.
yeah. Besides that, if people want to get in touch with you, BJ, where can they go? I think you just listed your website, but you've got a few things going on. So
Yeah, I would say, just email me directly. If you got anything out of this, I would love to hear from you. Brian, BRIAN.KANG510 @gmail.com. And I said something earlier where I want to change it a little bit. I said lighten up. That sounded a little harsh. I meant give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace. Reach out to me. I would love to hear if you got anything from this episode. Brian.Kang510 @gmail.com. And yeah, hit me up.
okay, well, that pretty much wraps up our time. Again, I know I didn't formally introduce myself earlier because I've been doing this for the whole season, but I'm Nancy, for your season 3 co-host for Erasing Shame. And this is BJ Kang of the Asian American podcast as well. And this wraps up our time. So thanks so much, BJ, for joining our episode today. And we will see you guys next time. We are Erasing Shame, one story at a time.
Thank you for being a part of Erasing Shame. Please rate and review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, and like on Facebook. Share with your friends and followers. Together, we are Erasing Shame, one story at a time. Get all the details at erasingshame.com.